India has never played in the World Cup. So today, the only way this video ends is if they win it. India will soon overtake China to have the world's largest population. 1.4 billion citizens with untapped footballing potential. So I'm putting football on the same level as cricket in India, as well as giving Indian clubs the facilities that they need to produce and develop wonder kids, in the hope that one day they can win the World Cup. I reckon I might be simulating for quite a few days before that happens. In-game, India are ranked 102nd in world rankings, spurred on by their best player Sunil Chhetri, a 37-year-old striker who was once on the books at Sporting Lisbon. Never played for Hyderabad though. As you can see, I am wearing their jersey, but more on that later on. He's got a current ability of 88 out of 200, which means if we're making comparisons, he's probably as good as a top-level National League player. Sadly, he wasn't able to get India to the 2026 World Cup, as they lost in the second round of Asian qualifying. The way Asian clubs get to a World Cup is actually really interesting. The lowest-ranked nations in Asia compete in a two-legged tie, where the losers are knocked out. The winners progress to a group stage where they play higher-ranked nations. This is where India fell short. The top two from each of the 9 4-team groups are then put into 2 groups of 6. The top 2 from each group automatically qualifies for the World Cup. But the teams that came 3rd and 4th are then split into 3-team groups, with the top teams from those 2 groups also qualifying for the World Cup. And then the teams that came 2nd in those 2 groups, in this case Oman and Uzbekistan, play in a playoff match, with the winner taking the final Asian FIFA World Cup place. You might be thinking, Tom, that seems like there's far too many Asian teams in the World Cup. Well, remember, the 2026 World Cup is expanding to 48 teams, so there are going to be more qualification spots in each confederation. So although India hasn't qualified for the World Cup, they are now 93rd in FIFA rankings. But the fruits of our labour is starting to show, as previously the best player had a current ability of 88, well now it's 137, and there are some big potential abilities in there. I am concerned that none of the players for the Indian national team though are at Hyderabad. I'm wearing their shirts, so I am rooting for them in this video. Also, if you want to get your hands on this jersey, you can get it from Sangalo, who work with clubs around the world to sell their kits in markets they wouldn't ordinarily be able to reach. It's a great way for us kit collectors to get some really cool niche kits, whilst also ensuring that the club Sangalo partner with get a fair deal and an additional revenue stream to help them compete each season. Also, whenever I play five-a-side football, I like to be wearing the most niche kit I could possibly find, so this really does help actually. All the kits are brand new with tags, as they're acquired either direct from the club or the manufacturer. This Hyderabad one is made by Hummel, so it's really good quality. So have a look at their website, linked down in the description, and let me know which of the kits you like the look of the most. Hopefully we'll see Hyderabad do well soon, because currently all they've done is just slip backwards. Not ideal. Okay, I've moved forward 4 years and it's happened a lot quicker than I expected. India have qualified for the World Cup. Also, remember, the original plan for the 48-team World Cup is to have groups of 3 teams, but that has been changed as of March this past year. It's going back to 4 teams, but that's not been programmed into Football Manager yet, so it's still in the 3-team system. It's also worth noting that this isn't the first World Cup India have ever qualified for. They did qualify for the 1950 World Cup, but then they got disqualified because they refused to wear football boots. They wanted to play barefoot. Not quite sure why, but that's a story that I've been told. Either way, I fancy India's chances against Canada, especially because these 3 players with high potential are developing nicely, although they have all taken different career paths. One of them has actually stayed in India, one of them has sold their soul to earn some massive wages, and the other plays for Al Ain in the United Arab Emirates. Liverpool fans, to be clear, that was a joke. Naresh Pandey actually went to Liverpool for £37.5 million via RZ, and the other player, who I will absolutely name Baller, has actually played for 2 different clubs in the UAE. I am actually quite interested in their qualifying campaign. They only finished 2nd to Thailand in the 2nd round, and actually really struggled in the 3rd round, only coming 4th in their group. But of course, this gave them a second chance in the 4th round, where they ended up winning their group to qualify for the World Cup. So based on the 9 teams qualifying, At the very best, I think we can say India are 7th best in Asia, which is really surprising given some of their players. Looking through every player in the database and sorting it by current ability, their 2 best players are 15th and 21st best in the world. The next best Asian player is Tomiyasu, who now plays for Real Madrid, and he is 101st in the rankings. Oh, no way. India lost out to Canada in the group on goal difference. The best results from Asia were Australia and South Korea, who both got knocked out in the 3rd round. So if we consider that India is at most 7th best in Asia, and 2 of the best teams in Asia only made the 3rd round of the World Cup, I think we've got a lot of progress to make over the next few years. Let's fast forward to 2050, where India are 16th in world rankings. That is quite the climb in 20 seasons. They have a pretty stacked team. Most of the starting 11 are over 150 current ability, meaning that they are in the top 1% of players in the game. The subs and reserves do drop off a fair bit though, and I don't think they're going to have the depth in that squad to have won a World Cup by now. But they have won the last 2 Asian Cups, so my guess is that the rise at FIFA rankings is pretty recent, thanks to a golden generation. As for the World Cup, they haven't yet got past the 2nd round, having lost to Poland, England and Argentina at that stage. So if anything, I think that 16th in FIFA rankings is actually a little bit high. Now, I was kind of hoping that as a byproduct of creating some better Indian players, we're going to see Indian clubs win the Asian Champions League and maybe even the Club World Cup. However, sorting all Indian players by current ability, anyone who's got anything about them quickly moves to Europe. As a result, the Indian Super League is only 9th in popularity in Asia. And of course, there hasn't been a single winner of the AFC Champions League. In fact, the best any Indian team has done is get knocked out of the 2nd round in 2048. But how about my boys at Hyderabad? If they've won the channel, although they don't appear to be in the Indian Super League. That's because they've just been relegated from the second division. Look, we've fallen on some tough times. The board didn't back the manager in the summer transfer window, so we couldn't bring the players in. I fully back the manager, Sunil Singh. You just have to give him some time to turn it around. He's only been at the club for a decade, yeah. Oh, maybe it is time to sack him, to be fair. Look, let's give it another 20 seasons where India are now 13th in FIFA rankings. Sadly, there is no World Cup win, but they have won the Under-20 World Cup, although that was 13 years ago, so I guess that generation of players never turned out to do anything really. But they have won another 3 Asian Cups. They won their 3rd in a row and then missed out twice, including once in the final, before going on to win the last 2 competitions. The national team does look stronger in its depth. Still not good enough depth to go on to win a World Cup yet, but I think we are certainly getting there. If we get a list of all the Indian players by current ability, you can see they have a few elite players before it quickly drops off to below 135 current ability, which is probably the same as a top championship player and maybe the lower level of a Premier League team. If we switch to English players, they have a similar number of elite players, but the drop-off is a lot slower. Then compare it to Brazil and it just looks unfair. Also, I am a huge fan of this player's name being Pitbull. That might be the best regen name I've ever seen. He's actually a really, really handy goalkeeper. But his name's Guilherme. Like, where does Pitbull come from here? It makes no sense. At least Kevin's first name is actually Kevin, and Leonardo's first name is actually Leonardo. Where does Pitbull come from? I don't know, but I'm happy that I've seen it. Back on topic though, the point is I just don't think India have got the depth to win the World Cup. And I think that's backed up by their recent World Cup results. They haven't ever made it past the 3rd round, and actually in the most recent World Cup, they actually went backwards. The good news is Hyderabad are now back in India's 2nd division, although they aren't challenging for promotion. The Indian Super League has dropped back slightly in popularity. If Hyderabad were actually in there, I'm sure they would be number 1. Now, it's getting quite late here, so I'm going to leave Football Manager simulating overnight. The year is currently 2071, but if I just clap my hands, we're in 2144. If India haven't won a World Cup by this stage, I genuinely might cry. They are currently 7th in FIFA rankings, which is a good sign, but the actual national team isn't as stacked as I was hoping for. Take away the top 3 players and it might be one of the weakest sides we've seen in the video. Now it is pretty safe to assume that they are the best side in Asia. They've now won 14 Asian Cups, including the last 4. But have they won a World Cup? Yes, they've won just the one, but they've won it. Okay, we can't end the video like that. We've got to dive into this one. They won the World Cup in 2074. That is 3 years after we finished off last night. And I'm pretty sure I said, I just don't think India have got the depth to win the World Cup. Okay, let's go back in time and have a look. So actually, we do know some of these names as we'd looked at their national team just 3 years prior, but they are better as some of the younger players have improved. They had a fairly easy group stage, but then almost got knocked out in the second round as they beat Australia on penalties 11-10. I mean, how lucky is that? All 11 of their players scored and the Australia keeper didn't make a single save. Imagine if they'd lost that. We'd be in 21-44 and still not won a single World Cup. They do enough to beat England in the third round, and then they beat Brazil in extra time. But the extra man looks to have really helped them out. We saw the depth that Brazil had earlier on. If they had 11 men on the pitch for the full 90 minutes, I think this might have been a different result. The semis against Norway end up being their biggest win of the tournament before they beat Spain with a 92nd minute winner to win the World Cup. So yes, India did have an insane team at the time, but everything went their way. They win a penalty shootout 11-10. Brazil have a man sent off for half the match, and they score what can only be described as a rather frustrating goal to concede in the 92nd minute of the final. If I was Spain's manager, I'd have been fuming. Literally, it was their first time past the third round, and they went on to win it. I think we've been very lucky here, because going back to the future, the very next World Cup, they get knocked out in the group stages. Looks like they reached another final in 2086 where Brazil got their revenge, but aside from that, it's really rare that they get past the third round. So actually, it is fantastic they won the World Cup when they did, because otherwise we might be sat here for another 120 years waiting for the next one. One final check on my boys at Hyderabad, and they have won nothing in 120 years. They just have their one Indian Super League that they win in real life, and that's it. It's been a tough simulation for us, but I'm going to be a Hyderabad fan through thick and thin from now on. If you enjoyed this video, I am certain you will enjoy the version we did with Luxembourg. That video is on screen for you to watch right now.